broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to our 147th program on the dissipation of glamour. And we're on reading number 87. We've concluded the previous section. We were dealing with an ancient glamour of separateness or separativeness, and we were looking at the war period and the similarities between the German group and the Jewish group. And he gave us a little bit of meditation regarding how to help solve that. Now, that has been somewhat ameliorated in Germany, I would say, although there is a kind of a resurgence of Nazism in the United States and maybe in some of the areas of Europe, but I think worst in the United States, where there is no experience of having passed through the really country destroying experiences of the war. And then now we're ready to go on and look at what's called here the contrast of Maya and of inspiration. Would just like to welcome you who have been able to come, Alexandra and Anne and Annette and Ario and Aurea and Carl and Catherine, Frederick, Gretchen, Heike, Jessica, Joan and Johi, Karen and Leon, Margot, Mariana, Nathalie and Olivia and Sandra and Tia and Zenaidi. And over here on the staff side, we have Joe and Michael, Stacy and Tuya and myself. I'd like to begin with the great invocation. It's a good way to begin or a good way to end. So you can say it aloud where you are if you wish, just as long as you are on mute. Otherwise, we get that, cacophony of lagging sounds and so forth. And then we'll start our, excuse me, our reading for the day. So the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. from the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, thank you. In this book, we find glamour used as a general term. It covers illusion, glamour, and Maya. And we can also do the same with those other words. The general Maya covers illusion, glamour, and Maya. And the idea of illusion is not always used specifically for mental misinterpretation, mistakes in the use of the mind, but can relate to the other two categories as well. Often decay refers to the astral plane as the plane of the greatest illusion. So we can see that he's using that term in a general sense. But now I think as we get into this new section, we will be dealing with a more specific or targeted view of what Maya may be in a very physical sense. I'll get a little bracket there, and hopefully I can use it in case I want to write something. Never can tell. Maybe something will come up. Okay. So let's begin. So the contrast between Maya and inspiration. I think we use something like a technique of inspiration to deal with Maya in this limited sense. When it comes to the great generalization of what Maya is, as the world illusion or the general universal illusion, I think our only way of proceeding is through the art of identification, about which we are learning a little something as we go. It's a very a deep process, and of those that we know, the Christ is the great expert. Of course, we can't really say we know the Christ in the maximum and optimal way, but at least many have stood before him as the initiator for the preliminary initiations of the threshold. So every true aspirant is known to him because, after all, a true aspirant is one who has taken the first initiation, and the Christ, at this time at least, and probably since 500 BC approximately, is the initiator. Okay, so DK tells us here we come definitely into the realm of material substance. We know that substance and matter can be differentiated. On every subplane there is matter, but that matter can be substantial to matter of a lower plane, and then it is called substance. The first substance that we run into, the first substanding type of energy, is the energy of the etheric body, the prana. So we're entering the realm of material substance, and lots of work has to be done there first, as Rule 10 informs us in the rays and initiations, before we can really successfully deal with glamour on a world scale. Nevertheless, we begin. So the realm of material substance, that's what we're entering here. And this is essentially, and in a peculiar manner, the realm of force. Michael, Stacy, and I were discussing the contrast between energy and force. And let's just say there are many ways to look at it, but force is a more concrete and directional and directed type of energy, and the use of energy. So it's the realm of force, and Maya is predominantly for the individual, the aggregate of the forces which control his septenary force centers, to the exclusion, I would emphasize, of the controlling energy of the soul. So there are liable to be differentiations, numerous of them, in the realm of force, coming under the heading and direction of one major type of energy, in this case, soul energy. There are many types of energies connected with the different chakras, and we're kind of entering, in a way, the realm of the Holy Spirit, or the third aspect of divinity, when we deal with force. There's someplace in Esoteric Psychology Volume 1 where he does a bit of esoteric numerology, and he compares the word force and the number 4, which he spells out as F-O-U-R. So some very good hints about how the master would suggest numerological analysis found in that little section. Anyway, we wish to be controlled by the energy of the soul. Generally, energy is given, in the way DK uses it, a higher placement than force, and force is derivative from energy, or derivative of energy. First the energy and then the force, but it's all relative, and what appears to us to be an energy may be, in the last analysis, from a higher point of view, simply a force, and on it would go. When we reach the very top of our 10-dimensional universe, he calls it a universe of 10 dimensions, and before emanation begins, which is the constant scaling down of entification, maybe we have only energy. But from the point of view of the super universal state, because we don't always have a universe, even the universe may have been derived from a force outward moving into objectivity, and that we might call the ray of the absolute, or at least the ray of the transcendental, trans-universal deity. Maybe it comes forth as a force and then takes its position in universe as an energy from which all subsequent emanated forces are derived. Well, DK is not absolutely consistent in the use of these words. Here and there you find, different kind of use, but generally it's enough to know that the way he uses these terms, energy is fundamental and higher in its nature than the forces emanating from the energy. Okay, therefore, you will see that the bulk of humanity, when he uses a word like bulk, well, I've always thought it's kind of like 80%, 85%. You will see that the bulk of humanity, until a man stands upon the probationary path, which does not mean that he is yet even an initiate of the first degree, the bulk of humanity are under the control of Maya, because it's all these physical things which are rectified through the sacral center, the seventh ray, and the planet Uranus at the first initiation. Pluto and Vulcan clean house. Then come adjustments in the sacral center under Uranus, which rules for the most part the sacral center and the transference, beginning of the transference of the energy to the throat center. So the bulk of humanity have not yet taken the first initiation. Some millions have, and we don't know the numbers. Always the numbers are increasing, and when the great Lord again walks among us, it will signify that humanity has taken the first initiation. What the numbers are to enable Master DK to say that, we don't know. But the reappearance, let's say it takes place no sooner than 100 years from now, probably, will signify that what we call humanity has taken the first initiation. And this is one of the things we're working for as we prepare men's minds and hearts for the reappearance of the Christ. And this is our first and greatest duty, and the use of the great invocation is our most effective instrument in that preparation. So until we stand upon the probationary path, which involves the opening of the latter part of the fifth petal of the egoic lotus, we are very much under the control of physical forces, under the control of Maya, and we have to demonstrate that we can rid ourselves of the Martian impulsive nature of sacral center response, whether it's involved with sex or the accumulation of money or in general an attitude of materialism. We have to control all that. For a man, he says, succumbs to Maya when he is controlled by any other force or forces than those energies which come direct from the soul. This is really a good little section here. You know, you can almost pause at every sentence and you can find a need to ponder about it and assimilate it. For a man succumbs to Maya when he is controlled by any other force or forces than those energies which come direct from the soul, conditioning and controlling the lesser forces of the personality as they eventually and inevitably must and will. They will be controlled, and the ancient domination of the personality will finally end. Again, in the rays and initiations, that idea of ancient domination, I think, is a very good one. I'd like to take you to a page, if I can find it. Domination, ancient. Well, let's see, maybe is the word domination. Ancient.
Try dominating.
Free. Is it dominating?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There it is. Transfiguration. Freedom from the it's authority. Well, we had the synonym anyway. Freedom from the ancient authority of the threefold personality, marking a climaxing moment in the history of all initiates. You know, page 686, this is really good because it deals with all the different types of freedom which we have to achieve. And at the first initiation, we are overcoming the ancient authority of the myopic world, the world of physical instinct, and the kinds of impulsions which pass through the etheric body when the astral body is very strong and uncontrolled. Anyway, we want to be in the seat of the one who controls and directs. And we don't want to be driven up and down the land, as DK refers to it, by those forces which dominate before we can take a stand with Saturn and choose to regulate them. I sometimes think, you know, that when you get that star Regulus in your chart pronounced, it's either now in the 29th degree of Leo, or maybe by now in the 1st degree of Virgo, I'm not sure. But it tells us a lot of occultism through its name. And Regulus brings everything under control. Now, you know, sometimes it's considered to be a pejorative thing to be controlling. You know, you don't want to deal with people who are controlling because they usually block the expression of your will. You know, that's totalitarianism on a small scale. Totalitarianism is social control and standardization, and he tells us in externalization that that is our first duty, our first objective physical duty is to defeat totalitarianism. But at the same time, we want to be in control, and we don't want to stifle our own creativity, our own spontaneity by some idea of what control means. We can be just as rigid as a government when dealing with our own nature. We can squash out and crush out very many good things by rigidity of mind and will. So we have to be careful there as well. The totalitarianism of the concrete mind, if I can put it that way. Okay, so we don't want to succumb to Maya. We don't want to succumb to these impulsive forces which drive us up and down the land. There are several veils on the etheric plane, and the very first veil, the influence of which has to be overcome, is the veil of impulsion. And then astrally, the veil of distortion, mentally, the veil of separation. And as we're about to make transition into the astral plane, the veil of aspiration, being filled with aspiration, but doing nothing about it. Okay. So when a man is under the control of physical, astral, and mental forces, he is convinced at the time that they are for him right forces. You know, he pretty much might say, well, that's just how I am. This is how I was born. This is my nature. You don't expect me to change my nature, do you? Or, you know, I gotta be me. You know, the old glamorous mantra, I gotta be me. So, and he's quite convinced that these forces are not controlling him, but that he's controlling them, which is mistaken. So herein lies the problem of Maya. Such forces, however, when they control a man, I'll bring this down a little bit here, try to get things out of the way. You don't see this, but I do, and it blocks my vision. When they control a man, these forces determine him in a separative attitude and produce an effort which feeds and stimulates the personality and does not bring in the energy of the soul, the true individuality, especially when, you know, we're usually deluded and we think that our individuality is the personality, and it's not. If we could focus on the higher mental plane at will, we would know the personality is not who we are and what we are. So when Maya is operative, and DK calls it by an unflattering name, which you have heard, that he calls it that unthinking emotional mess, indicating that it's just a rampant habit nature, which we're doing nothing to correct. It produces a separative attitude. And it feeds the personality. Glamour, I suppose, does the same thing, and illusion does the same thing. So, you know, what we have to do is be able to look at ourselves with that cold scientific eye and basically say, well, how much am I controlled by Maya? How much by glamour? How much am I the victim of illusion? And of course, illusion has to be studied. I think he gives us 7 basic illusions, and sometimes they're pretty close to each other, but the fundamental part is misinterpretation and misunderstanding. And the fundamental part of glamour is wrong attraction and wrong repulsion. The Buddha was always using, right and wrong. And when you look at his Eightfold Path, it's right this, right that, right something else, right memory, right livelihood, right meditation, all that. Right, right, right. It's such a choice, because we are still doing the wrong things if we really concentrate on how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. So anyway, DK tells us that Maya produces the separative attitude. And it feeds and stimulates the personality and does not, just like glamour doesn't, and illusion doesn't, Maya does not bring in the energy of the soul. You've seen people, haven't you, that are just blocked when it comes to bringing in the energy of the soul. They just can't manage it, well, I've seen it, when the concrete mind is overly strong. Of course, sometimes it happens to me. I was just doing a book the other day, and suddenly I realized, whoa, I've been asleep for 10 seconds. I've been on automatic pilot here. But people who are blocked from their higher type of mind, they just frequently fall asleep in meditation. They can't go any farther. That's it. And I've seen that repeated in 3 notable instances, and in all of them it looked like the fifth ray mind in its skeptical capacity or its super concrete capacity was causing the trouble. So anyway, we've been undergoing an analysis here, and he says it should prove illuminating to us if men and women would bring their lives under a closer scrutiny by the true inner or spiritual man. We disidentify from the personality and we take at least an imagined place as the observer on a higher plane and at a higher point of tension. If they would bring their lives under closer scrutiny by the true inner or spiritual man, and could thus determine what combinations of energies conditions their life activity, they would not continue to function as they do now, so blindly, so inadequately, so ineffectually. Well, every once in a while, DK gives a real frank analysis. I remember him talking about a whole host of unflattering terms, and the stupidity and the dullness and the obtuseness and the stubbornness. I mean, he was just piling pejoratives upon pejorative. And it was all about the average aspirant. And I thought, well, when he really looks with a cold eye at where some of us are and what we're doing, he can really see that we are still in a prison of our own making. So name your prison, is it all 3, or is it sometimes for the more mental type, it is illusion, but that doesn't mean that that type is devoid of glamour. There are mental glamours, or devoid of bad habit patterns instead of good spiritual habit patterns, and that would be Maya. There's a lot of things in the way. we have not yet taken the fourth initiation. And usually those who say that they have are misunderstanding the whole situation and are very far away from it, however eager or ambitious they might be. So DK goes on and he says, if I can just get the thing to move here, it is for this reason that the study and understanding of motives is of such value and importance. For such a study determines intellectually, if properly investigated, what factor or factors inspires the daily life. Well, we're always told that the master watches our motives. It's not so much whether we are immediately successful in the fulfillment of our good intentions. If we persist with the right motive, we will achieve, and the motive is a impelling force, a magnetic force, driving us towards the realization of certain patterns of achievement. And you will know your own motives, and I will know mine if we search deeply enough. If in any sense it is the aggrandizement of the personality, so frequently the case, we will be on the wrong track. And we do see that, with many leaders who have the flaw of self-love, narcissism, some kind of exclusion of all others in preference of oneself. Let them not forget that Narcissus, in the old myth, he drowned in the stream while pursuing his own image. So those old myths really do give us some important insights concerning traps along the path. So this is a statement worth careful consideration. The study and understanding of motives is of such value and importance, for such a study determines intellectually, at least we'll know something, if properly investigated, patiently investigated, and without that immediate response of rejecting what puts us in a bad light. So if properly investigated, what factor it is or what factors they are that inspire the daily life. Just pause for a minute, even right here, and ask yourself what factor or factors are inspiring your daily life, giving you the energy to go forward. In esoteric psychology 2, there's a section which deals with the methods of achieving soul control, of inducing soul control, such things as the factor of synthesis, the quality of the hidden vision, the urge to formulate a plan, the living of the creative life, the factor of analysis, fifth ray. He doesn't really give us the sixth and seventh. Having set a pattern, he believes we can carry it through. So this is a statement that he's just made worth careful consideration. And I would ask you, what is your major actuating motive? For whatever it may be, it conditions and determines your predominant life tendency. And it's a simple enough thing, isn't it? To ask oneself, at least the act is simple, to ask oneself or another, what is your major actuating motive? Sometimes in conversations with others, I regret that I have not asked that question, because it's so clarifying, isn't it? And it's so, in a way, eliminative. Many people can pursue the expression of their soul, but in the early days, I was shocked to realize that such people, avoiding a higher type of duty, which comes with selling all you have, giving the money to the poor, and following the Christ, it avoids that for many people. They want to express their soul. It's good enough in many ways, but it means they cannot be used as participants in the most important planetary processes, which right now are the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. We've got to learn to see as the masters see, not in entirety, but to a much greater extent, and then we will know how to conduct ourselves. Many people, particularly the unintelligent masses, are solely inspired, driven, animated, by desire, material, physical, and temporary. They want what passes away. They rush from point to point, as it tells us in the third ray integration formula, and they are deceived by that which is impermanent, which passes away, and it just vaporizes in their hands once they have grasped it. Animal desire for the satisfaction of animal appetites, material desire for possession and for the luxuries of existence, the longing for things. Remember Ralph Waldo Emerson, things are in the saddle and ride mankind. The longing for comforts and for security, economic, social, and religious, control the majority. The man is under the influence of the densest form of Maya, and the forces of his nature are concentrated in the sacral center, which is, in a sense, a very accumulative center. It's not just the sexuality element, it's the whole material acquisition. And it anchors one on the physical plane, hopefully in a way that is not pervaded by wrong use of energy and illusion and glamour in general. Others are motivated by some form of aspiration or ambition. They've moved a bit higher. They've finished playing on the green playing field, maybe the golf course, who knows, and they've grasped the orange ball of ambition. And there's a star connected with it, and they say, my star. And they want to be a star. So they're motivated by aspiration or ambition, aspiration towards some material heaven, and most religions portray heaven in this manner, ambitions for power, desire for the satisfaction of the emotional or aesthetic appetites, and for the possession of the more subtle realities and the longing for emotional comfort, for mental stability, and the assurance that the highest desires will meet with gratification. Now, can we remember any kind of recapitulation in which we found ourselves exemplifying these traits? Are we still exemplifying them in any way? Have we not caught ourselves? You know, when you are the lion in the cave, you've caught the king of beasts if you have blocked the other entrance. You just hunt yourself and you see wherein you have acted in such a manner that is not oriented towards the spiritual fulfillment and service. So some of these things are not bad at all in their own right. You know, you can imagine certain artists that are seeking aesthetic satisfaction, or maybe people in general want to be surrounded by nice surroundings and color and beauty and order, you know. The gardens at Versailles, where the French kings held court, were meticulously managed, and part of the overall beauty and impressiveness of that environment. It certainly doesn't mean that there were unselfish people inside the castle, or if we don't want to call it a castle, you know, the buildings for royalty. Beauty, they wanted the beauty. And, you know, we can probably think in our life of what is an emotional appetite. The desire to be loved is an emotional appetite. And certain ray types come in on those glamours, the love of being loved, and it makes one susceptible to flattery and manipulation. We have examples in today's world. And we want to be sure of what we think and that it's correct. See, all these things give a sense of comfort on three different levels. It's a little bit different from the strictly physical satisfactions of an instinctual nature. We've moved up in the quest for personal satisfaction. All this is Maya in its emotional form. Now, DK is hinting that we're not just looking at Maya in a strictly physical way. You can expand its scope. Maya in an emotional form, and it's not the same thing as glamour. In the case of glamour, the forces of a man's nature are seated in the solar plexus, and in the case of Maya, they are seated in the sacral center. Glamour is subtle, and emotional. And Maya is tangible and etheric. It's a kind of physicality of a subtler kind. So, both of them cause problems, but when DK wrote the title, Glamour, a World Problem, he was including illusion and Maya as well. Let's see how much further we will go. Well, maybe we have gone far enough. Just maybe this next paragraph. Such are the forces of Maya which actuate, motivate, and energize the life of the ordinary man. I've often said that Maya is not the real, it is the actual. And when you talk about actuating, you mean making to appear. Under their influence, he is helpless, for they inspire all his thinking, all his aspiration, and his desire, and all his activity on the physical plane. And so here is his twofold problem. Well, we're at page 150, and we just do a little bit, and we go from page 148 to 150. I almost prefer to take it slowly so we can understand a little more in depth. So many of us have read the books, but we have read the books or listened to the books without deeply studying the books. Now that really has to change. So when DK says, as he so often does, ponder on this, he means stop and ponder. And before long, you have to be the one who tells yourself when you must stop and ponder. It'll flash at you, like an occult hint, and wait a second, I have not totally absorbed the message here. I must stop and I must ponder. Be patient. Take the time. Use the meditative techniques that we have been taught, whether it's simply soul light or the light and wisdom of the triad to some measure. It all depends on how much of Master DK we want to read and apply. He basically says you don't read carefully enough. You must change that. And then, of course, find the way to apply what you have absorbed in a useful program of service. Okay, so the contrast between Maya and inspiration, and we're just about ready to get into inspiration, the breathing in of fire, the fire of divinity, maybe the breathing in of solar fire, to be inspired by, or maybe even, under certain circumstances, the breathing in of electric fire. And it's not just physical breathing, it's a kind of energy exchange with the higher planes. So this is the end of number 87. And our day today is the 26th of June, and the webinar is number 147. And next time, another 7 days from now in the morning, we'll have webinar 148, and we'll begin with reading 88, and we'll be on page 150. I know it seems a slow time, but you know, talk about patience. Imagine an Aries person talking to you about patience. I had a wonderful relative who had a first-rate mind, and he would be always emphasizing certain short mantram like statements which carried truth. And the particular thing he used to say to me was, patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue. He would also say, you know, speaking to my Aries nature, there is a difference between action and motion. And he would repeat that and other terse lessons which a young person had to absorb, coming in and acting on the basis of his skandhas from a previous life. So we'll get into that. My goodness, it's going to be the it will be the 3rd of July in the morning, and you know, we'll take up the next glamour. I'm kind of continue with this whole idea of race relations now, because it's been so emphasized. You know, the patience of the community of color is at an end, and justifiably so. And you know, it's pretty well understood that our government and the government of other countries cannot be run by, let's just call it what it is, a separative white men. Everybody has to have a chance, and one day in the 6th root race, there will be an amalgamation of the races, and a certain uniformity will appear in the appearance of the races. There will not be this kind of 5th ray separativeness and distinction. It will more or less become uniform. DK talks about that. More of a golden hue, he talks about it. Of course, the 6th root race is long, 10 million years as I understand it. So we have plenty of time to work that out, but right now, racial relations are very strained, and it's all coming from an extension of egotism that we call the glamour of racial superiority. This was the same thing that Germany succumbed to, and the Japanese, in a completely different race, 4th root race bodies, succumbed to this as well, emphasizing a very different type, but one that was supposed to be superior to all of the types. Okay, so are there any questions or statements which you would like to offer at this time before we get into our closing meditation?
Michael,
Michael.
before we get into those, in your red, beginning Glamour World Problem webinar 148,
Right. I got it.
July 3.
Got it. That's my favorite thing, to miss something out, right?
Just here helping.
Thank you very much. And you know, well, you know, this is another subject, but some very cataclysmic, catastrophic predictions are in the air regarding the disease factor by July 4th. I mean, really, exactly as the epidemiologists predicted, and then lay low for a while, you know, because there's no convincing until something happens So it is happening. And now the numbers are of cases, at least in the United States and maybe Brazil and other places, are peaking beyond their previous high levels. So we, many people are done with the pandemic, but the pandemic is not done with them. And human boredom with limiting circumstances is no guarantee that one is out of the woods and no longer in danger. So it may be a very different 4th of July in the United States, and other countries will, they're doing better, basically, than the United States, but there's still so much, what do you call it, peaking, peaking of the outbreak numbers. So much for the 4th of July and all of the hoopla, all of the parades, all of the close crowding. People just have to use their common sense now, and even those super eager to be politically on the side of their commander-in-chief are beginning to see that it just didn't work, and they'll have to pull back and stop the opening up process or slow it down considerably. There are just so many people in the world who will sell out the health and welfare of others for money. It's as simple as that. And that line of demarcation is now showing up. It's the ancient battle between the third ray and the second ray, and it's unfolding before our very eyes. Okay, well, I got that one, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, Karen's hand is raised, but Anne wrote before that. I wonder if you might say a little something about the complexity of assessing where one is on the path and recognizing one's glamour or illusion involved in that assessment.
Well, it's a big question because it's a huge study. Basically, all of DK's books, and especially the psychology book, number 2, and Initiation, Human and Solar, deal with the gradations of the path and the traits which characterize people at those different levels. The centers, the chakras that are involved in transferring their energy at the different initiatory levels, the planets that are involved in doing that, whether it's Pluto, Vulcan, and Uranus for the first initiation, or Venus, Jupiter, and Neptune for the second, or Mars and the Moon for the third, or Mercury and Saturn for the fourth, and Jupiter and Uranus for the fifth. Knowing what those planets are meant to do in human life and understanding our own horoscope, and by self-observation and discussion with others, being able to, as the observer, assess one's ray makeup and assess what for yourself or any self is the next step ahead. That's a really important one, Somehow deeply intuitively, we have a feeling about what the next step ahead is, what to conquer, what to cultivate, what to contribute, and on the basis of what observation tells you and what other people close to you may tell you, you can get some kind of idea as to what has been accomplished and what has not been accomplished. So, in a way, it's one whole huge study to which Master DK has contributed. What are the different stages of the path? And where do you stand? Now, if you go to Esoteric Astrology, page 332 and 333, it tells you about how the undeveloped person, which we are not, responds to their astrological factors. And then the more advanced person is also described, and then the disciple initiate is also described. So for each sign of the zodiac. So when you look at yourself, you self-assess. Where am I standing? What do I have to do? Have you mastered the lessons of the various initiations? Is there pretty much physical instinctual control of the first initiation? Is there pretty much the control of the astral body prominent at the second initiation? Is there mental control and infusion of the mind by the soul that is found at the third initiation? I think for people like ourselves, while it may be interesting to assess the fourth initiation, it's not germane to our own state. If people imagine that they are there, for the most part, they just are not, because they wouldn't need the guidance of Master DK in the form that he's given it if they were taking the fourth initiation. So basically, self-observation, comparison with other people, astrological analysis, ray analysis, all of this, of understanding which chakric triangles are activated around page 170 or so of A Treatise on Cosmic Fire. All of these are germane to understanding what our next step ahead is. And as DK would say, every disciple is being prepared for initiation, every true disciple. So what is that initiation based upon the achievements associated with that initiation and based upon an honest assessment of what we have achieved? Now, sometimes, if Master DK were our letter writing teacher through someone like Alice Bailey, he might spell these things out, i.e., you are being prepared for the second initiation. That was, by and large, the largest preparation in the group. And people were not necessarily knocking at the threshold in a way that indicated they would soon enter. And then there was one man, DHB, I think. You remind me of myself when I was being prepared or was in training for the third initiation. And then when you look at what Alice Bailey herself and Roberto Saggioli and maybe Foster Bailey were achieving in their life, maybe you were looking at third degree initiates, at world disciples at work. So close observation of yourself and others, and alertness to what the books tell you are the tasks surrounding any particular stage of discipleship or initiation. The aspirant, the probationary disciple, the disciple leading to accepted disciple, and finally the initiate. Then study also the end of discipleship 1, little chelaship, chela in the light, accepted discipleship, chela on the thread, chela in the aura, chela in the master's heart, and for masters who are chelas, the blending of the lights. Those 7 stages, called the 6 stages of discipleship. Wonderful reading, and maybe sometime we really ought to take that up. With those things for study and observation, you should be able to make a reasonable assessment of what you have to do and where on the path that indicates you stand. Of course, after you look at it, then you forget it and get on with the work. Because the people that are always obsessing about where do I stand, you know, it's a type of selfish self-concern, and we don't want to fall into that. So I guess that's what I'd say, you know, those things are available for your study, plus your own powers of observation. Okay, Michael.
Thank you, Karen, for your patience. You are unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, Michael, and a comment. And my comment I'll just make in response to what you said earlier about, you know, the disease in our country and the behavior of the citizens here in the U.S. And I think it really speaks to the adolescence of our country. You know, we hear that we're an adolescent country. Well, this to me is a beautiful example of that.
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, and I mean, that helps me to look at it from that perspective. It gives me a higher way of looking at it. But my first question is, you had mentioned that the one who sells all, gives away everything to follow their soul, can't be used by the hierarchy to prepare for the reappearance. I didn't understand what you meant.
Okay, it's a little, let me clarify this point. Christ is very demanding. He says to the rich young man, and you have to interpret it symbolically, take all you have, sell it, give the proceeds to the poor, and follow me. Now that is what he desires of the person who is to take the 4th initiation. That's how drastic that renunciation is. So the rich young man at that time went sadly away because he was attached to his gifts, the gifts that were stored in the causal body and through which, of course, he could serve and help because he was a high soul. He just wasn't ready at that time to take the next drastic step. But he couldn't, when it says sell all you have, okay, that's very literal, but he couldn't detach himself from what he had and its effectiveness in service. He was he couldn't follow the Christ in that respect. Now there's a lot of people who are in that boat, and they follow their own soul gifts, and they work with their soul expression and the gifts which need to be expressed on the outer plane, and all that is very good. They express themselves as souls. They're interested in their treasury, so to speak, because the causal body is called the treasury, and they work their whole life with expressing themselves as the soul, but they don't make that next relinquishment which says the divine plan is thus and so. and it calls for the dedication of or the relinquishing of all that I have been preoccupied with. I need to give it to a higher method of action, a higher way of being, because it seems barren. It seems they're giving up everything that they have used to help humanity. And of course, that's how some people feel with the statement, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Meaning, the causal body is burning up and the solar angel is leaving and you're on your own. You're between crosses, between the fixed cross and the cardinal cross. And at first, you might feel bereft of all the gifts that you had as the rich young initiate, okay? So that's going to be a challenge for any person making application to the fourth degree, because they are going to be very rich in the content of their causal body, and yet preoccupation with those riches, even for a good cause, is not as high as they could go if they really followed the more drastic way of the Christ. So I hope I've clarified that a little bit. We do want to express our soul, but if we get overly fixated on that and ignore what the plan demands of us, we may be falling a little short. And not everybody makes it at first, I must say.
Oh, thank you. And my second question has to do with intention and motive. Do you think they're similar, the same? What are your thoughts about that?
I think motive has more the driving Kama monastic force in it. I think intention is a focusing of the will upon the accomplishment of certain objectives. Motive is driving more aspirationally and emotionally towards maybe the fulfillment of the same objective. But I just feel that both are necessary, and there's more will in the idea of intention. You know, in our fourth initiation, in our fourth meditation in Dina, what does he give us? The third, it's purpose, will, and intention, or will, purpose, and intention. It's at the end of the meditation. I wonder if I can find it. Is it around, the late 120s, maybe, of Dina 2, maybe? And let's see if I can, I'll just try that. Let's see here. If I can, I know what the problem is. Like I say, I have two keyboards in front of me, and they're both attached. Maybe that okay. No, that's not it. It's right in here somewhere. It's meditation 4, and I'm not immediately finding it, but it has the 3 factors of will, and intention is one of them, along with purpose and the will. So let's see. Oh yeah, okay. I went in the wrong direction. I went backwards from meditation number 3. And this is, this is it. Okay. So at the very end of this meditation, we have something that gives us, Well, it's right here. It is. Number one, purpose, will, intention. So it's part of the series. It's the most concrete part of this definition for the utilization of the will factors. You can have good motive and still be deficient in the application of will to the realization of that motive. We all know, I'm motivated to do this, but somehow I don't have sufficient strength of will to carry it out, and my intention is clear, but it's not backed by fixed determination. So I would just say intention is more mental, willful than motive, but both are important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Okay,
And
Michael, anybody else?
yes,
yeah?
Olivia writes, some encouraging good news. All the many wonderful people and groups participating online in World Unity Week, the width and breadth of the many, many expressions of unity to offset separativeness. Speakers coming up shortly after our webinar, Jane Goodall, Marianne Williamson, Jean Houston, and more, and gives worldunityweek.org for the website.
Okay, that's good. And these are, luminaries in the new group of world servers group, each with a different emphasis, but they've really made their mark. So yes, this is, we just have to keep working on the goodwill and the general service of the world servers. It is happening, but we can't afford to relax our point of tension, because that happened before, and the forces of obstruction always take advantage of that slackening of the point of tension. So this is very important, the whole idea of world unity. And for each one of us, we cannot let ourselves subside into a slackened position, certainly not before this American election, which will have world effects, definitely. And then we have the 5 years continuing on to the great conclave. We cannot imagine that it will get any easier as the day approaches, but it is indeed, thanks Livy, good news, and those are illustrious people. Okay.
And Olivia had her hand raised also, and you are self-muted now.
And I just wanted to add, Michael, the thing I've just been amazed about, it isn't just these really well-known people, but it's been a week of people around the world from all these different countries with their initiatives, people, we've never heard of, and they've been invited to share what they're doing. And I think that to me was also so encouraging, because all these little initiatives, and big, but little and small and varied, and the many ways in which they are expressing unity and seeing that connectedness, which will grow into more of a synthesis and a oneness of as their lives progress. But it's just been so encouraging. But I agree with you 1,000%. We can't let up one bit, because we are coming up with some of the fiercest tests, and our resolve and our continued dedicated work must be strengthened even more.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Livy. I'm remembering something that a clip or a video that Sheldon and Helena had, and it was about the kinds of groups you're talking about, and they listed them all, I don't know, in alphabetical order or whatever, and then speeded up the camera And the list went on and on and on and on. It was just like a torrent, just like a river. There were just thousands and thousands.
Yeah, and
So,
that was
we're,
yeah.
yeah,
That was
good.
done about 10 years ago. And so you can
Yeah,
just imagine now how this is
yeah.
catching on fire. And yet, they need our subjective support as well. But it's just, it was very encouraging to see this. And people were invited. There were all these convergence rooms on different topics. And I mean, it was just packed with people globally, from morning till night. So around the
Wow.
clock. Yeah.
Were they
So
were they wearing their masks, Libby?
no, because it was online.
Oh, okay.
It's
That's it.
online.
When it comes to having to wear a mask online, then we're in trouble. Oh,
Right.
okay. Well, thank you for reminding about that. That's so
Yeah,
important.
happy to. Bye.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
and then Carl has his hand raised, and you're unmuted, Carl. Please go ahead.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Carl.
When you were talking about gifts and actually giving up your gifts, I was thinking along the lines of people when you ask the question, well, what is it I can do? But as we evolve, I think the question changes. It changes to what is needed? What does the divine plan need?
I agree with you. And now look, our gifts are really important. We call these things qualities of contribution. We've had our work in the psychology aspect of the University of Seven Rays, qualities of cultivation. We're working on them, and our gifts are already resident within the causal body, and we can contribute them, and it's very important that we do. And they will season and augment however we cooperate with the divine plan. But like you say, there comes a time, and it comes maybe later. First we begin with our gifts, and then we renounce according to the need. And finally, we pass through something called the great renunciation. And that's the tough one, because many people falter at that point. What is the most profound need? Now, DK has given us something to really think about. He said that Christ was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he was confronted by the anchoring of will upon the planet and the taking of the sixth initiation, Chohanship, a very high degree. And he said the Christ had already worked out in his own mind a way to use what he had for the best advantage of humanity. And yet the plan of Sanat Kumara was even more drastic. He doesn't go into all the particulars, and the Christ was faced with having to renounce his own obviously excellent, well worked out plan in favor of something still more demanding. So all the way up, we have these renunciations, But like Master Moria said, when have you ever become less through sacrifice? Certain sentences in the Agni Yoga teaching just hit me, and they stay with me, and that's one. When have you ever become less through sacrifice? So I would say times are pressing now, and what is the need? I believe you're correct. We may not be talking about the third and fourth initiation, but we are talking about the ability to see what the need really is and act upon it according to our abilities and our gifts.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl.
And that takes care of all the questions and comments and so forth.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to still work now this time on this glamour of racial superiority. which is finally, it looks like it's being attacked in a way that up to this time it never has been. So many things are coming to light, and the oppressiveness and brutality of the forces that represent a totalitarian approach, they are in our face. And of course, you know, ever since the television and the video and the camera, smart camera was invented, we just can't argue about how it happened because it's all in front of us. And we just see that there is a hatred between races, and especially the fearful, at this time, white race, fearful of losing their prerogatives, their superiority, their so-called superiority. And it's usually male and it's usually white, and they seem to be supporting forces which are inimical to the manifestation of the divine plan. So we have to keep up with this, and there have been constant protests along with this. It's the pandemic and the fraught racial situation, and the economic unraveling, which is, you know, it's going to involve the humbling of the United States with its foremost economic position, and with, of course, world implications. So one of the big parts here, and it's big in terms of the election that's coming up, I think 80-something% of Americans support the frustration, or the support the reason for the frustration of the communities of color, and especially the Black community. And you know, even though there are forces which appeal only to economics, as if money were more important than people's welfare, the soul of America, adolescent though it may be in its personality, is sound, and we're waiting for the and maybe seeing the rallying of these higher values, which well, you know, which the great avatar Lincoln, the racial avatar, demonstrated in a major emancipation, a major movement towards advantage for a whole population which was enslaved. Now, we cannot think that slavery is finished. I mean, economic slavery exists, and brutal physical slavery exists in other countries. The tendency to enslave others who are different than we are is still alive and well in certain areas of the world. So the United States has to set an example, and right now it's setting often a pretty bad example. For what reason do we, or does the United States, have the greatest number of cases and deaths in this pandemic? That is unthinkable, really. And as someone was saying, you know, it speaks to the adolescence of the people, and frankly, to the lack of soul development of a great number of the people. In other words, DK has told us that up to a certain point, the younger souls were not coming into the United States, and then they started to come in, and the United States became the heir to the sixth ray Piscean civilization. So if it didn't set so many trends, and if a poor example were not being set, there would be less concern, but there is a major attack from these left-hand forces, which connect with the third aspect of divinity. Money is more important than people. There is an attack in process, and we have to do what we can internally to stop that. So this evening I'll be doing the meditation. Tuya has been doing it for a few times, and she's not available right this moment to do it, but I think she is tuning in. So again, maybe the naming of the group members as we realize our oneness and our unity and our cooperation. Anne and Annette and Ario and Aurea, Carl, Catherine, Frederick, Gretchen, Heike, Helen, Jessica, Joan, Juhi, Karen, Leon, Margot, Mariana, Marion, Nathalie, Olivia, Risto, Tia, Zenaidi, Joe, Michael Stacy, Tuya, and myself. And we'll just be silent as we take in our presence with each other. So wherever we may be in terms of form, we are together in soul and in mind. And we use the protective formula and this cross from the forehead to the heart to the left eye to the right eye, this cross of divinity, protecting the whole group, tracing line of light, our own protection and the protection of the group. As a soul, I work in light. And darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light, I work, and from that point, I never move. We see that large cross of light forming before the group and before every group member. As this kind of work is dangerous. And we prepare by focusing the dual light of matter, that's etheric physical, and the lower mind, the reasoning mind. And we bring the material light and the light of mind together on the mental plane. And we seek to contact soul light as if above the head, from the higher mental plane to a point above the head. And we visualize the descent of soul light, and we try to feel that. And imagine the merging of soul light with the light of reason in the lower mind and the material light of etheric physical nature. And from that point of fused triple light, we say together mantramically, thinking about what we're saying, the light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Then we utilize the formula as we visualize a great searchlight coming forth from the triple light, and it casts its light beam upon the astral plane. Let's first visualize that directing of the light beam upon the astral plane. And we say, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So we try to change the character of the glamorous phenomena found upon the astral plane. And we use our weapon of light to do that. We pause for a moment. And we invoke the spiritual will coming from the monad and atma and the jewel and the will petals, synthesis petals, will petals, making its descent from the will of the highest aspect within our human nature, increasing the spiritual will and the power of the beam we have generated. With power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. And our goal is the dissipation of the glamour of racial superiority. In the level of monadic living, we are all equal. And the differences between human beings have to do with their incarnational experience. But we stand on the brotherhood that is indicated by monadic oneness. We stand on that great equalizer, which is the being we all are. And this glamour has led to so much abuse and the deprivation of so many millions from being able to express the aspect of the divine will which they represent. Everybody has a piece of the plan. And when there is this prejudice, this prejudgment, this assurance that one group is better, higher, whatever, than another, it avoids what is essential. Everybody has their contribution to the expression of the divine will as it implements the purpose through the plan. So we'll use these words of power and excuse me, we'll say to ourselves, the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of racial superiority. Remember that DK told us there are no pure racial types anymore. It's all a mixture, and it's becoming more and more so during the sixth root race. The power of our united light negates the quality of glamour from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of racial superiority. Now 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose as we see this work of weakening and dissipating the glamour subside. We see this happening. So this glamour is weakened. It must weaken. It's weakening now perhaps more than ever. A great necessity for right human relations in the world. And for the unification under the impulse of goodwill, love and goodwill of the human race. And so we withdraw our beam together from the astral plane, and we retract that into the triple light and imaginatively distribute the light to the places from which it came. That searchlight is shut down and redistributed, and we work on helping the cause of brotherhood, which is monadic in nature and has nothing to do with the external envelope, the instrument, the personal outer appearance, and so forth. We work for the unity of the inner human beings who recognize that the outer form is simply instrumental, and any inner person could be born in any race, in any place. And then we will sound the Om 3 times, imagining that the work has been done and we have contributed something of value to the dissipation of this glamour of racial superiority. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and love and many blessings. Tomorrow we go on with our broadcast on the soul of nations. It'll be an evening broadcast, at least evening here in Europe. It will be 5 p.m. And then on Sunday, we continue with the broadcast schedule, attracting financial resources for the work of the externalization of the hierarchy and the reappearance of the Christ. Lots of love, many blessings. Thanking the whole team for the work they have been doing to bring these webinars and broadcasts to you. So all the very best, and we'll be converting this program so you can play it, and it'll be appearing on Makara. See you soon. And by the way, I may have mentioned the externalization of the hierarchy. We've reached the end of the book now. There's a little bit to be done in the beginning, but if you want to know how to serve and how hierarchy is preparing for their great sacrificial service, this is the book to read or the book to listen to, you know. It gives great advice as to how we can help. So bye-bye, everyone, and we'll be with you shortly. Tomorrow. See you then. Bye-bye.